we're going to have the applause going as I welcome on the stage our first speaker of the day, who's going to speak about new age consumer insights and also the release of the research paper by Kantar. Ladies and gentlemen, the practice head, Kantar Shopper Insights. A huge round of applause as we welcome on the stage Ms. Sushmita Balasubramaniam.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Okay, the topic that I'm going to talk about today is not something which is new to any of us. I think we encounter this in our daily lives. I belong to Generation X. I work with Millennials. I have my own challenges, and then I go back home and I have a Gen Z to deal with. So I'm sure many of you are in my shoes. So let me just quickly go on. Now, when we talk about generational cohorts, I mean, we sort of talk about it on a personal note, but when it comes to retailers and marketers, why are generational cohorts important? Before we get into that, what are generational cohorts? Essentially, these are segments that have been defined in terms of the generation they belong to. We talk about millennials. In fact, there was a lot of discussion about millennials yesterday, and then we have the Gen X, which is a generation before, then we have the Gen Z, which is the emerging generation, and then we have the emerging silvers. Now we've called this not because of the gray hair, but because of the mindsets and the way they are moving. And I'm calling them emerging silvers because here we are not talking about the truly senior citizens. We are talking about people who are typically in the 51 to 65 age group. In fact, let me just put that on. Yeah, this is how we have defined the cohorts for the presentation today and for the research paper that we will be releasing later today. So essentially, there are millennials who were born in the early 80s, and then there is Gen Z, which was born post-2000, and there is the Gen X. So when I started working on this presentation, I was just curious to say, I just Googled and I said, why generational cohorts? And the kind of, the stuff which came up, the images which came up, I thought I should share some of them with you. And this is something which I think all of us, like I said, encounter in our daily lives. There is a generation which never knew computers and is adopting computers. There is a generation which was born into the world of computers. They don't know a world of computers. So all this has different implications for marketers and retailers. Now, these are images, but then we also have some real-life examples of, say, the Gen X and the Gen Y, as we call them, the millennials, in real-life examples. Now, what is actually the difference, or how do we look at these differences? One is that there is an age and a life stage that they belong to, which is a very important predictor of attitudes, mindsets, because of the history. When you look at it in the context of the formative years in terms of the political situation or the social situation, you start understanding the behavior and the whys behind the behavior. So essentially what we have done here is looked at mindsets, we've looked at psychographic data and said, what are the implications for marketers and retailers? So essentially because we need to develop, formulate strategies that target each of these cohorts. They're very different. We have to target them through appropriate channels and with messages that resonate with that audience. Otherwise, it'll fall flat. So our focus today is basically for this presentation is the millennials and the Gen X. You may ask me why. It's because in terms of earning potential and in terms of their prime earning years, this is the largest segment, and hence let's focus on where the money is. Let's start with the millennials. Essentially, you're talking about 40 crore millennials in India. They were born into a generation, or they came into the workforce when the economy was opening up, and there was the outsourcing which happened. So there was a lot of, in terms of discretionary income, they saw income levels which the generations in the past had never seen. There was digital explosion, of course. So all of this contributed to a lot of euphoria and a lot of, in terms of the mindsets, they were very different from what the generations had been before. To start with, they're digital natives. I mean, when you ask them, questions like, can you live without the internet on the mobile phone? There are more than 30% who say no, they can't. And they are always online. They're influenced by comments, they're influenced by, they refer to the internet before buying anything, they post comments, I mean, they post reviews themselves. And, we have seen data where they have said that, if I'm watching, a TV ad or I'm looking at something else and I see something interesting, I immediately Google it and I find out what it costs. So it's a two-way dialogue all the time with this audience. A little more about who this audience is. They're confident. I mean, if they think they're right, they couldn't really care less about what their parents' views are. And they're go-getters. If they want something, they're saying, we'll beg, borrow, steal. I mean, I've taken it from the youth survey which happened by Hindustan Times in the last year. And this is a slightly younger millennial crowd, which is you're talking about sub 25 years. So when an overwhelming 80% say that I will beg, borrow, or steal to do something that I really want, and if something benefits me, I will do it. I will ensure that I'm in the right circle, and I want everything fast. So that's the kind of young generation that we're dealing with. And they're experienced. I mean, playing dirty is okay sometimes. I mean, they have broken traffic rules, they admit to, they say they have lied with parents, they have deceived their partner, and they have done things that their parents may not necessarily like. So this is the generation that we're talking about. But then something happens. They also grow up. And if you look at a slightly older millennial, then they move on to seek a life of purpose. We are hearing a lot about this, not just in India, globally. I mean, we saw the Me Too, we saw stand-up campaigns, and for instance, Bangalore, where I come from, there are protests all the time on the street because of foaming lakes, because of traffic. So there is a lot of activism which is happening, and these people are participating very actively in those causes. So when you look at the hard numbers, when you say that, I mean, it's important that a company acts ethically, and I refuse to buy something from a company which is, I don't approve of, I will pay more for environmentally friendly products. And I'm truly worried about pollution, congestion. Now, all this is very heartening because, I mean, this is a generation which is in its prime and it's entering its prime years. So, and this is when we talk about messages which resonate with this audience, these are some of the aspects that you need to consider. So, what is it that has, they move from playing dirty, I mean, not necessarily very, clean, to seeking a life of purpose, essentially because, I mean, they grow up, that euphoria sort of, I mean, they get married, they have children. So it's very interesting. If you look at, we have we do a survey, which is a very large survey among 15 to 55 years, which is called the Target Group Index. And when we ask questions about, are you optimistic about the future? I mean, and when we expose them to those kind of statements, the percentage of those who agree with these kind of statements are actually lower in this cohort than other cohorts, which means that they're actually playing a balancing game. As shoppers, that's something that we are all interested in. They are shopaholics. And I think this is something which is true for all generations. They love shopping, they enjoy shopping for clothes, and they are experimental. But they also seek value in what they buy. Remember that this is a generation that is is playing a balancing game, and hence what we need to sell to them, they have to find value. Otherwise, they're not going to look at it. So that is about the millennials. Now let's go on to the next generation, which is the Gen X. Now this generation was, at the cusp of a very, a tremendous change in India. For instance, they actually brought the middle class dream of, education and economic redemption because of education, it came true. So, and of course, they are in their prime earning years, and there are about 24 crores Gen X in India, so it makes sense to look at what they are talking about. Now, because of the life stage that they were born into, I mean, there was economic liberalization to start with, and they were very different from the parents' generations. So the traditional markers of success, which is your career, your job, the car that you own, all of that, they're still led by those kind of that's what signals success to them, and they are in control. I like to be in control over people and things around me. I'm responsible for everything around me. So this is a very decisive, very firm kind of an audience. These people were born into a generation which didn't know digital, but the way they have adopted it is they've adopted it wholeheartedly. But do they use digital the way the millennials use it? Not necessarily. It's more I have adopted it, and look at how well I'm using it, and how efficiently I'm using it, and my mobile phone, that's my signal of success. So the way they use digital is very different from what the millennials do. And yes, this is something which I think we are seeing repeatedly. In fact, some of the speakers spoke about it yesterday. There is this whole nostalgia and notion of Indianness which is coming across. And I would rather prefer to use herbal. Things like desi ghee and full cream milk are actually good for health. And I prefer home cooked food. So we all know that Patanjali has entered 100 million households today. So that says something about where this generation is heading. And they don't necessarily now, at the stage they are in, they don't necessarily get influenced by though when they came into the workforce, going west was still something which was very desirable, but not necessarily so today. They are a far more matured audience. As shoppers, they are open, but they're decisive. They, like I said, I think across all generations, shopping is something that people love, but they are not necessarily the experimental kind like the millennials. They tend to watch and wait and see what is in store for them, and they tend to hold on to buying things. But yes, it's less than other cohorts. There is a segment which does that, but given that they are in this decisive frame of mind, they still, they are able to make decisions very quickly. So what does it mean in terms of millennials and Gen X? This is a summary. You're talking about digital natives versus digital immigrants, and as a signal, a segment which is confident, adventurous, versus somebody who looks at nostalgia, Indianness, traditional symbols of success. There's somebody who's balancing demands of life, they're seeking a purpose, and they love shopping and they're looking for value. Here, they love shopping, they're decisive, so if there's something which is shown to them, which they think they will like, they will immediately buy. So what are the implications for retail for these two generations? Let's start with the millennials first. They are the most immediate and significant. So typically, the precedence needs to be given to this segment. They are experimental. There is encourage experimentation, but keep it within the family. When I say keep it within the family, I'll give you an example. There is a lot of work that we do, for these big billion days and this, the Maha sale days. And we often see that people wait for those days. But when they go to buy, they generally buy from the same outlet. 7 out of 10 buy from the same outlets. They don't go to other outlets. So there is some kind of loyalty, and they stay within a particular brand. And so given that you have a captive audience, we need to sort of build a range, exchange, sort of encourage experimentation within the brand, and that's what they're looking for. Simplify choices. When I say simplify choices, it's not as if reduce the range, but encourage familiarity. There should be, the touch points needs to be similar across the brand cues, whether it's omni-channel, whether, it's online, offline. When I look at it, the brand I can recognize the brand anywhere. And in fact, a perfect example of this was what we saw yesterday was the Wow Momo. I mean, they're looking at so many different retail formats, but that yellow is so, significant, and I mean, I can recognize a Wow Momo anywhere. So that's the kind of, familiarity that we're talking about. And tailor offers that are, play to this deal seeker, because these guys are balancing various, it is a challenge for them, so help them with this, the financing. And creative financing options. Is shared economy, DIY, is all a trend across the world today. So is there something that we can do to tap into that? Exchange, upgradation, loyalty offers. One of the speakers said yesterday, Mr. Bali from Sephora said they are very loyal. I mean, they love loyalty programs. But we increasingly find that the old school loyalty programs don't work with this generation. Very often, I mean, if you tell them that you buy 2,000 more and you'll get reward points, very often we see that it actually becomes a nuisance factor, because when they go back and they want to buy more, they don't really have enough to buy. So the thing is to say that I have enough that you can buy, and you can buy more, and that's when the loyalty program starts working, not just a rewards which I can look at later. Redefining the store, I think we've spoken about this enough. It has to be seamless. There is no online, offline. It has to be, the research online, purchase offline, buy online, pick up at store. All of these are something which need to be looked at. And given that this generation is very actively into causes, look at stories which sort of resonate with this audience. I mean, some of the recent examples that we've seen is Anouk from Myntra, for instance. And then we had a couple of other ads which sort of broke the gender bias, broke other kind of biases. So it has to be through causes, programs that are even Swachh Bharat, for instance, which are swaying this audience and appealing to them. When we come to the Gen X, now this is these are, like I said, audiences which are in their prime earning years, and they are looking at more premium, brands. And there is a very interesting phrase that we have for these kind of consumers, which is called the closet luxury consumers. Now, these are not first-generation luxury consumers. So they they can now afford premium brands, luxury brands, but they will not buy it unless they see value in it. And that's basically what this generation is all about. So we have to effectively look at product lines which are, earlier I don't think everybody had access to a Rohit Bal, but when Jabong went with Rohit Bal, it was something which became accessible. A lot of fragrances that we talk about now, we find that they pick up travel packs, and that's how they have access to the fragrances. We had a speaker talking about sachets yesterday, for instance. So when you, maybe luxury brands and sachets don't do together, but when that happens, that's when you get this generation hooked onto that, because they have the money to spend, but they will spend only when they see value in it. Yeah, now these are people who are not looking at a very long purchase cycle. So if you give them a deal, they will close it quickly. So look at shortening the decision cycle with strong calls to action. Digital creatively, like I said earlier, these are not people who were born into the digital age, but they take pride in using digital very well. So when you give them, you need to make them feel good about their, the immigrant status, and give them personalized offers, invitations, and sort of this will immediately boost the basket size and ticket price, because, like I said, this audience can afford it, and they don't necessarily have a very long purchase cycle. And the nostalgia of Indianness, in terms of positioning, communication, and product lines. I think the person who is, doing it very beautifully now is Rujuta. She talks about going back to your grandma's recipes, going, to, look at your backyard. In fact, Chef Sabi also spoke about that as a trend yesterday. So I think that's I mean, if you look at the, paper boat, for instance, they have also tapped into that segment very well. So essentially, that's what we're talking about. All of this is actually, we are releasing a paper today which will be available to all the delegates, where we have looked at all the cohorts. I have only spoken about 2 cohorts here, but we have looked at all the cohorts and said, who are these people and what is the implication for retailing? So I think all of them will get a soft copy of the paper. So please read it. If you have questions, please write to me and I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. We request you to continue to be with us on stage, because now, ladies and gentlemen, to very quickly sum up the session, but more importantly, give us the 3 questions from our audience that were standout questions. We welcome onto stage the Vice President Marketing and Visual Merchandising, Spar Hypercity. Please welcome Mr. Pearl Raj Kanivadi. Sir, for the next 5 minutes, the stage is all yours.
Is it on? It's not on. So just one correction, that's Spar Hypermarket, not Spar Hypercity.
Thank you,
no problem. So I just found out something really interesting, Sushmita. I found out that I probably think like a millennial, but I'm closer. I probably look like a, what's it, silver?
Emerging silver.
Yes.
But there is, you don't have that, you don't run that risk, so it's okay.
Okay. So thanks, Sushmita, for a fantastic session. Okay. I think we'll all leave today with some really rich insights. So what did we really hear today? Okay, we heard that for sure, and this is stuff that we already know. We know that the country is made up of a diverse group of customers and potential customers. So we learned that there are 4 basic groups: millennials, emerging silvers, Gen X, Gen Z, and these are distinct in their behaviors. And today we saw in specific 2 groups based on the age and life stage that they were at. And we saw that each of them, the way they look at life and the way they look at their attitudes and interests makes them completely different from each other. The millennials, digital natives, fast. They're always having a 2-way dialogue, okay? And interestingly, and we know this from people who work with us, that they play dirty sometimes and they say that it's okay, all right? So that's interesting. But what stands out the most is that they seek a life of purpose. It's not enough for them to just live a transactional life, the life that they've seen people before them lead. So they seek a life of purpose and they seek balance. They're not ready to do anything all the time. They want that balance and they'd like to be respected for it. They're aspirational but value seeking. Okay? As a contra, Gen X, they've worked hard, they've reached somewhere, and therefore they feel like, hey, it's time for us to be rewarded. We really feel that, you know, we worked really hard and we can reward ourselves once in a while. Of course, that's why they have these signals of success, which is cars and what phone they use, etc., etc. So that's what they reward themselves by. But as consumers and adopters of technology, they're really, as Sushmita mentioned, immigrants. And they're not very, very comfortable as millennials are, but they're getting them and they know how to use it and they're open, okay? What's really, really interesting is what we are seeing with how this generation reacts to what we are currently seeing, which is Patanjali and the rise of Desi ghee, etc., etc. And what will be really interesting is that how this shifts over a period of time. Once the millennials come into play and that becomes the major part of our population, how consumption is going to change for us. Okay. So quickly we'll move on to the questions now. So this is a question from Akash Kumar. Akash, are you here? All right. So your question is, Sushmita, is it really right to see customer behavior in the light of age rather than mindsets? I kind of agree with you there. Wouldn't it broaden the scope if we looked at millennial versus Gen X in terms of mindset?
Akash, that's basically what we have done. What we have done is looked at the age group and then looked at their mindsets and hence what the implications are. So all those, the psychographics that we saw, I can't live without my mobile phone versus, I will not buy from a company which I do not approve of. All of those are actually mindsets. And we are looking at mindsets in the context of their age. And that's the starting point. Have I answered your question?
You'll have to give us a minute. Yeah, okay. So Vignesh Jayaprakash, are you here? Okay. So Vignesh's question is, what are the challenges faced in registering a particular brand name in consumers' mind for their regular shopping? How do we ensure to make them regular?
Can you repeat that question?
I think what he's saying is that what are the challenges involved in imprinting a brand name in the minds of consumers, and how do we ensure the registry of that brand name establishes and moves forward into regular consumption behavior?
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm probably not the best person. We have experts here from large marketing companies who can answer that better. But basically, the one of the things that the Indian consumer seeks is value, right? And as long as he or she believes that they are getting what they want and a little more, then I think you can look at it in it's a very simplistic answer, but that's essentially what you're looking for. And we have, India is actually a very brand loyal country. I mean, we have people who have been using the same, detergent powder for so many years. In fact, it's now changing a bit because other brands are also coming into the fray. But in terms of that's the, it's my brand and gives me what I'm looking for.
And the last one, this is from a Sheetal Choksi. Are you here, Sheetal? You're there, okay. So the question, I think, is what's the best way to measure the success of consumer insights with respect to a particular product or service? I'll probably add a little bit into this. How do we check, whether the insights that we're talking about right now, whether they work? How do we know that for sure, whether these are right insights?
Okay, there are follow-up researches that you can do to see whether it works or not. So there is, that's what market research is all about. I mean, you test a product and then you launch it, and then you go back and say that, is it doing what it is supposed to do? So there is I don't think I should use this forum to discuss that, but I think we can connect offline and
The most exciting standout question for you was?
I think I'll take the last question because I see a business opportunity there.
So
smart move.
Can we please have Sheetal Choksi join us on stage? And we've got the check. Can we please bring it on? Huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Kanivadi, please join us, center stage as well. Ms. Sushmita Balasubramaniam, please hand over this check. Sheetal, congratulations, 10,000 rupees from InSync Shop Fittings. You're the first winner today, day 2 of In-Store Asia 2018, presented by Renam. Thank you so much. Thank you.